12:05. Welcome to the Freedom Park Conservancy's first public input meeting. We are so excited to be here today along with the SWA Group and Sycamore Consulting, and thank you for joining us. My name is Harriet Lane, Board Chair of the Conservancy. The goal of the Freedom Park Conservancy is to get the opinions of all of our neighbors, the city at large, to see what they want this park to be and provide tools that meet people where they are now. We have notified the neighborhood presidents, the board directors, neighborhood board directors around the park, sent out newsletters, releases to the media. We've notified partners and institutions, we've purchased ads, and we have a dedicated website because your opinion matters to us. We encourage you to take full advantage of our online survey by visiting the Freedom Park website at freedompark.org and clicking Master Plan. It's the #1 thing you can do right now to engage. And please check back often for calendar updates as well as video recaps of all the public meetings will be on that page. So now is the time to continue the vision and expand the potential of Freedom Park for the 21st century with your input. So I'm going to get started with a few introductions. First, I'd like to introduce to you the Master Plan Chair, Stephanie Wolfgang, and Master Plan Coordinator, David Hamilton.
Hi.
And there are several additional members of the steering committee here today. Michael Reeves, who represents 4th Ward Neighbors, and Nancy Boyd, Board Vice President and Art Chair. And today, I'm so happy to introduce you to and thank Amir Faroki for joining us today. I know most of you know him. Amir is the District 2 Atlanta City Council member, and represents the neighborhoods surrounding the parks and more. Amir?
Hey, thank you, Harriet, and thank you to the Conservancy for embarking on this important work. I know it is a big lift, and excited that you'll have a crack team of consultants working with you on it. This park is in many ways the lungs of our city. You know, it stretches through 8 neighborhoods, 200 acres. I represent 6 of those neighborhoods: Old 4th Ward, Candler Park, Emmon Park, Ponce Highland. Who am I forgetting? Oh, five of those neighborhoods. Candler Park for little 5 points. Well, Emmon Park, Old 4th Ward, Ponce Highland. But this is really a park that becomes in so many ways not just a thoroughfare for people commuting to and from the center city, but it's the backyard and front yard for thousands of residents of our city on the east side, and it's truly special in its passive use and art kind of art park mindset. And I'm excited to see what residents want to see for the future of the park, in keeping with its special history in our city. So all that goes to say, I know we're embarking on will be months of work together, and anything I can do to be helpful along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out to ask. And I'm here to be supportive and look forward to seeing what this work turns out. So thank you all very much.
Thank you for joining us. And last, I would like to introduce to you Jen Price and Ed Cadell, who are public involvement experts with Sycamore Consulting, and they're located here locally. Jen will be taking over from here and leading us into our meeting. So Jen, thank you.
All right, thank you so much to everyone who's taken their time out of the day to be here. We appreciate your presence. So we'll go ahead and just get started with the fun stuff. Again, thank you for being here. Just to let you guys know, we are recording this meeting, and this will be posted on the website for your neighbors to listen to in case they're not able to make it. So we'll give you a rundown of why we're here today, what a master plan is, and why we're doing it. And then we'll hand it over, or I'll hand it over to SWA, who's our consultant on the technical side, to go into more detail on the planning process and their ideas so far. After that, Ed will walk you through the interactive public involvement website, and finally, we'll answer your questions. But in between now and then, please feel free to submit any questions at any time using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can leave your name or you can remain anonymous, and we'll look over all of your questions and try to answer them as best we can at the end of the presentation. So why are we here? The original design of Freedom Park dates back to the height of planning for the Olympics almost 30 years back. And the park has changed very little since then. The communities around the park, however, have changed dramatically. So it's certainly time for an update to the master plan. But what is a master plan? It is a dynamic, long-term planning document that provides a conceptual layout to guide future growth and development. The Freedom Park Master Plan will provide a frame of reference and purpose by engaging the community at large to help determine what we all want this park to be for years to come. The Conservancy has been thinking about this for several years, and they finally raised the funds to do it in 2019, but that was pre-COVID. That being said, we think now is a really good time to reevaluate the worth and the place of public space in parks. Because of COVID and where we are as a city, our open spaces are becoming increasingly important. Having outdoor public spaces with clean air and cultural value becomes even more crucial now that people are using parks in a different way and with greater frequency as a relief from confined indoor spaces. As recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic continues, we want Freedom Park to provide a quality and sustainable experience for our city for generations to come. So the master planning effort is a 6-month process, as you see on the screen. We're here today with our first public meeting, and we'll be back with you guys 2 more times over the next 6 months. We're also meeting with our steering committee between that time and the Conservancy Board. But between now and the end of the project schedule, there will be plenty of times for you to engage with us and provide your input and ideas. It will talk more about those at the end of the meeting. But the main place for you to do that, obviously, is our website, where we will be posting lots of fun information. It's called Social Pinpoint. It's a platform that we're using, and Ed will talk through that. Remember to follow the Conservancy on all of their social media outlets. And then we'll be back to you for the next 2 meetings, again, in a Zoom format, because we're doing everything virtually. So with that, I am turning things over to SWA. They'll introduce themselves individually and hop into the presentation. And then Ed will be back at the end to answer questions and to talk about further engagement opportunities.
Okay, I think that's me. My guys here wanted me to let you know that this is not a hostage situation, sitting in front of a black flag or something back there. Anyway, so, you know, the question before us in trying to do this master plan is really the question on the screen. It's what makes a great park? And does Freedom Park even want to be a great park, right? Those are the things. I think the Conservancy has been quite clear in their expectations that absolutely that word great needs to be defined and we need to achieve it. But, you know, what we often do when we start with a project like this is we kind of, you know, in a way need to ask the park, you know, what does it want to be? Because there are sort of latent realities, right? Cooked into the fabric of that park and the history of it. You know, the fact that parts of it used to be a neighborhood and it goes through neighborhoods, that's extremely important. The fact that there's, you know, internationally known Carter Center there in the park, that's, you know, a very different thing than kind of the community neighborhood aspects of it. Plugs into downtown, plugs into history, all these things happen, right? So we need to understand all of that. And these are kind of the questions, and these are the things that we need you guys to assist us with. So, you know, one of the things that we like to do is remind the potential future users and the people that we're trying to get information from is we need to make sure we're kind of all working from the same, you know, vocabulary or kind of a baseline of thinking, right? In trying to set the tone of what is this park. So like, you know, in New York, everyone knows Central Park, right? It's super famous, it's huge. It's, I don't know how many, well over 100 years old, 150, I guess. And it did some amazing things at its time and it's still wonderful. But then there's like Hunter's Point, which is on the Brooklyn side. It's on the East River. Very, very different kind of park. And what it does is it tends to meet a lot of the programming and expectations of today, right? So whereas there's a historic thing that still works great at Central Park, trying to recreate that today, say on the banks of the East River in Brooklyn, would not make sense. And that's an important kind of takeaway, I think, for us. If you go to Boston, Boston Common, again, historic park. It's this big green space in the middle of the city, very flexible. It was originally a cow pasture. That's where you would graze your cattle. Comes along much, much later, the Rose Kennedy Greenway, lots of contemporary things, much more programming. It takes cues from Boston Common, but again, very different, right? In Chicago, there's Millennium Park, which uses a lot. It's a contemporary new park. It has a lot of historic features as well. And it does a great job of meshing the two. It's also highly programmed, right? So like during a time of COVID like this, there's not much to do in a park like Millennium Park because it is so dependent on program. Cafes, events, concerts, all these things. Whereas the 606, which is taking infrastructure and converting it into a different kind of a system, it's not so programmed. People intuitively know what to do with it right now, right? So I think there's great takeaways and questions in that. And then, in Atlanta, we don't want Freedom Park to be another Piedmont Park. It needs to have its own set of criteria. It needs to have its own, set of values that people, when they think of Atlanta, they think about Piedmont Park in a certain way, and they need to think about Freedom Park in a very different way, right? And they need to work together to create that whole. So a lot of the things, that we think about when we say what is a great park, it gets into, some simple words and thoughts, right? Nature is a big deal right now. Historically, I don't know, or say maybe 30 years ago, if you were designing a park, I don't know if nature would have been as important as it is today. So that is something that we think is important, and we need to understand that. Freedom Park already has this great kind of nature, but if you really look at it in detail, it's trees and grass, right? Could there be more nature? Could there be more variety of nature? Possibly. Immersion, right? You're in a city, there's all the complicated sounds and things that are going on. We think that trying to find a way that you can immerse yourself into this public space is extremely important today. Trying to get people to have a place where they can, turn off their phones for a little while or not be just so distracted by them, let them be distracted by other things that they're immersed in. Connection, and that can be a connection to your neighbors, connection to the community. It can also just be, again, a connection to nature or other types of things that are happening within that park. But we need to think also about how the park, it sits within neighborhoods. Are we trying to draw those neighborhoods directly into the park? Or are we trying to draw the region as a whole into the park? These are big, big questions that we need to answer through this process. And then community. Kind of building on that, what is the community that we're designing for? Again, it has a lot of wonderful neighborhood park components, and we want to make sure that we maintain those. But there's a lot of opportunity in this park. It's very big. All kinds of cool things that can happen. How far do we want to go with that to engaging a bigger cross-section of Atlanta? Equity. Again, I don't know if 20, 30 years ago, we would have talked about that in the design of parks. I think it maybe would have been intuitive in a lot of it, but it certainly would not have gotten the as much discussion as it gets today. This is extremely important. We need to really understand who are the users, why are they're going to be using the park, and really try to make sure that it's creating value for a broad cross-section of people. Variety is an important way that we do that. I think when we have visited the park, it's beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful. And your first thought is, how could you even do anything here? It's so fantastic. But it does lack variety. And variety is a thing that brings different types of people together. And it potentially creates funding sources, right? Where there's other ways to pay for maintenance and upgrades and things that you want to have happen. So, here you see people playing games in a park. You can't currently do that within our park, but this is a question for everyone. Do we want to do these sort of things? And then, of course, we need to work with all different age groups to make a park successful. Young people, old people, and of course, you need things for them to do that draws them together so they can learn from one another and have, conversations with one another. How do you get to the park is important. The mobility systems, are you riding a bike? Are you driving a car? Do I need to park that? Is there enough transit mobility to get people to and from the park? All those kinds of things need to be assessed when we're creating our master plan. Experience is huge today. You know, unfortunately, if there's not an Instagram moment, you know, in your public place, it kind of doesn't exist in the world. So we do need to think about that. Is that something that we aspire to have some moments here and there that are maybe talking about the history of the park or things like that, but they also have this kind of quality that people really want to memorialize them with photographs and whatnot. And then the character of the park. Is it contemporary? Is it trying to be historic? Is it a little bit of both? All those things, again, we need you guys to help guide us in the right direction so we can figure that out. Is there art? We know that there's art is already a big part of the project. What kind of art is appropriate going forward? There you have it. Art can be a gateway. Art can be a sculpture. Art can be something that's transient, that comes and goes. We need to kind of understand that and how we want to create a platform for art. So I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Kinder. Speaking of great parks, what also makes great parks great is that they don't only service the neighborhoods that surround them. They also stand in and represent the cities that they live in. And they almost exist in the mind. And when we think about Atlanta and Freedom Park in connection to Atlanta, it's very representative of exemplary urban culture that's created this park over time. It really represents a history of civic activism, a cradle of civil rights in America, and the fact that the park touches historically important sites that talk about civil rights bears incredible potential for interpretive storytelling and connection to very difficult histories, and using these histories to create a better future and better community. Freedom Park can talk about leadership of Atlanta in environmental stewardship and kind of development goals that really think about preservation of tree canopy Atlanta is known for. Freedom Park, becoming a designated art park is really representative of Atlanta as a cultural capital of southeastern United States, which is also extremely exciting. And of course, we didn't know that, but it turns out Atlanta Airport is the busiest airport in the United States, and it's also a gateway to the North American continent. So thinking about, this park welcoming visitors to the continent and becoming this cross-cultural nexus and a very visited site in the city, talking about the city is, a huge potential. And last but not least, Atlanta is really leading the way in reclaiming infrastructure for public space. Obviously, Beltline is the largest reclamation for public space project in the United States. And Freedom Park's history is grounded in a conversion of freeways to pathways. So thinking of how the two working together are really communicating this incredible, exemplary progressive urban culture to the rest of the country, has a great potential of how this park can put itself, but also Atlanta on the international stage. And when we start thinking about the Freedom Park site, it has kind of an interesting history of becoming, but going back, a very long history and thinking how it's situated, it's very potent in developing in terms of narratives of all kinds. So if we even think about Freedom Park site touching the subcontinental divide, and how hydrology of the park is informed by the fact that it is at that high spot in the continent. If we think about of the origins of the city itself and how indigenous pathways form this nexus, and how Freedom Park site is right in the middle of it all. And over time, with railroad settlement, the Freedom Park site was anticipating becoming part of that nexus as well. In the post-Civil War expansion, again, the the site was touching, you know, the center of, you know, new development. And, you know, in the early 19th century, you know, really the, you know, garden suburbs were developing around streetcar lines. And again, Freedom Park bears traces of those as well. And highway infrastructure, you know, in the, you know, middle 20th century really informed a lot of urbanization in the United States. And of course, the origins of Freedom Park are very closely tied to that as well. And with transit, you know, being introduced, you know, and the fact that we do have transit access in Freedom Park, it's, you know, creates a really incredible access potential to the site. And so when you really start overlaying all these histories and all these lines, and, you know, what we came to realize is, you know, the site of the park, the way it exists right now, has become the center of Atlanta's urban renaissance. And as a park of today, it also, you know, is overlaying itself on the regional bike superhighways, and it's actually part of this regional network, you know, connecting, you know, being a part of Stone Mountain Trail, and thinking of that incredible connectivity, incredible centeredness in the geography of the city. We start to realize what, you know, what an amazing contemporary park site it is for exploration, and also for creating value for Atlanta citizens. So really, you know, the location, you know, the heart of the city, the way we look at, you know, Freedom Park right now is, you know, within this neighborhoods, within this park, and we can't wait to explore what it means for the park in the future. Just thinking about the impressive qualities of the site itself, how large it is, you know, the fact that you know, it has such an interesting shape and such an extensive perimeter means that it creates this incredible equity in terms of access to green space in the city. The fact that it has so much residential development around it, you know, by default creates incredible number of users on a daily basis. And some people probably don't even know they are users of the park because they either drive through it or pass through it or bike through it on a daily basis. And again, it's also located in the center of a really incredible interesting neighborhoods and new development associated with Beltline, which also, you know, leveraging that is also incredibly important. So with this, I'm going to hand this over to Scott, who is going to talk about how do we build a great park.
So when we start any process and really start to dig down into the design, the potential, the first step is to start going through an analysis of the park and the surrounding regions around it. And we look at all number of factors, whether it be planning or topography, the character and typologies of vegetation, drainage, as well as sort of cultural resources and so forth, a lot of which Kinder and Natalia have already highlighted a little bit what's happening around the park. So there's many, many layers to this, and this is an ongoing process. We've gone through a number of that today. It would take a long time to kind of go through each of these in sort of detail. So what we're going to do here is really quickly just summarize it. And if you kind of think about all these different typologies of information and how we break them down to inform a park design, you can kind of simplify it and say, well, there's basically five components. So we think about in terms of planning, mobility, the environment, the programming, what do you do in the park, and of course, just generally, what's the character of the park? What does it project out to the city and its users, as well as what's the experience within the park? So I'm just going to go through a really high-level sort of summary of those. And really, the focus of this is more about kind of posing some questions and simulating thought. The planning the analysis documents will actually be posted to the website, so people can dig into those in a little bit more detail as this process moves forward. So we'll start with planning. And this is a little chaotic map here, but you can basically see the heart of the gray portion in the middle of the park. And if you sort of offset from that, sort of an area of quarter mile, half mile, this is sort of the close by regional sort of catchment area for the park in terms of population and people. And there's a number of different types of, mostly residential around the perimeter, the immediate vicinity of the park, but there are some active mixed use and retail facilities. And each one has a little different character depending upon where you are. And I think the other thing that's important about this map to notice is on the perimeter of the park itself, you'll notice these red and blue lines. And the red lines indicate areas that are actually where we have houses and residential lots backing up to the park, and sometimes even commercial lots. Whereas the blue tend to be more public access points. So it creates a unique, really for an urban park, tension, if you will, between the needs of the privacy and so forth of the community around it, but also how do we gain access to the park? This park has a lot of edges for its overall size, just in terms of length. And the porosity of the park is important, and actually can be a real benefit to sort of how we think about and how people kind of come into the park and engage in it. But we also need to balance that against the needs of the immediate community, who are effectively, just by location, in essence, somewhat stewards of the park as well. There's also a number of historic districts nearby. Of course, we've mentioned, the Carter Center in the center of the park, but we also have the Martin Luther King Landmark District on the southwest corner of the park, or just outside of the park. These are all incredible resources that can be thought of as actually almost part of the programming for the park as well. And so how we kind of connect into that and think about that, it becomes really important as well. So if we just kind of think about this planning, the shape of the park, as we all know, is informed by what was planned to be a freeway or highway system that then got simplified and pulled out more or less, but there's still roadways going through it. And the shape of the park is ultimately defined by the communities and the neighborhoods that define it on all of its edges. And each one of these communities has a very different character and different points that you can bring to the benefits to the park. We also have the Beltline, of course, that crosses over or under actually the park, just to the west of the Carter Center. That is a huge conduit to the park, and really it begins to think about the linkages of how this park fits, not just in connection with the neighborhoods, but also to larger regional systems within the park, whether that be to downtown, points west, and so forth. We mentioned, these residential communities. How are we going to think about this setting up a system where we protect these residential neighborhoods or backyards that go up against the park, but also provide these exciting program opportunities or activities in the park that every sort of urban park needs to service for the larger community around it. And so we start thinking about connectivity and gateways, where there are major road crossings or or where we cross over the Beltline. Are there opportunities for highlighting sort of a hierarchy of connection points? And then thinking about also the smaller connection points within some of the smaller streets that also cross over or intersect with the park itself. And if you really think about that in terms of mobility, of course, we have the larger road systems, but we have other components as well. We've got bridges that cross over. We've got roadways that go through. We actually have almost 8 miles of this park that is a roadside condition within the park itself. We've got bridges, we've got bus stops and bus routes that go through. We've got a MARTA station, which is an incredible asset to really connecting this park on a much more regional scale. And then, of course, within the park, just moving around, we have 10 miles of trails as it exists today. So that's already this is an incredible mobility infrastructure. The main thing is really, how do we think about creating a hierarchy of experiences and really taking these mobility options to leverage nodes of opportunity, and also address issues that we currently have in the park with the tension between some of these. We have these, what we call low comfort crossings, but it could basically be busy intersections where people are confronted, they're on a trail, but they have to cross a road. And if you think about kids on bikes and limited mobility and so forth, these can become real barriers to how the park functions as a whole. So very simplistically thinking, there's the city bikeway plan. If you overlay that, the faint gray lines you can see on here, and thinking about how, that bike system overlays to the park, does that create these nodes and opportunities for bike share or other types of facilities? Of course, the Beltline is another one we talked about. But also thinking about maybe this east-west connection, this idea of we're on the Stone Mountain Trail and thinking about how downtown gets connected to points west. If you were someone coming to the park from you've never been to Atlanta before and you came to this park, what's this what is the big things that sort of rise to the surface? Is there sort of one primary spine that we want to highlight? I don't know, maybe this is the spine, maybe not. Thinking about how people get there by other means. The park does not have a lot of parking. It has parking at the MARTA station, and it has parking at the far west end, at the schools that are located there. But there's also bus stops within there. Of course, we have the bike connectivity, but those becomes really critical. We want to introduce opportunities to people to come here, but not overwhelm the neighborhoods. We really want to promote this type of mobility. We also want to think about how people cross over those sort of what we call low comfort intersections or points where it's a little difficult for pedestrians. How do we make that more comfortable for people to get connected through and in or out to the park? How do you get to the Carter Center easily? Right now, it's a little difficult. And then if you think about, maybe if you took the idea of the Carter Center, just it is idea like a hub within this spokes of this, if you will, of this park shape, and think about maybe there's a sort of a loop that's really well defined around that, and that sort of spins off all these different possibilities of experiences. So mobility becomes really critical. Environment, nature, and how we think about it. Also, the park today, there's obviously beautiful trees, a lot of open lawn area, not a lot of biodiversity. It's beautiful. It's relatively, it's very well maintained for the most part. But there may be opportunities to gain, to build sort of more depth of experiences and more beneficial habitats. We have a great deal of grade change within the park. When we see topography, we think of it in terms of, well, it's an obstacle to ride your bike up, but it's also an opportunity to think about how stormwater and how habitats get integrated within sites like this, and how we can build biodiversity within the park, how we deal with stormwater and so forth. So again, we think about the ecological footprint as it exists today. It's pretty much, for the most part, one sort of typology, this bucolic, overstory, beautiful big trees, and this usually mowed turf ground plane. Functions very well as a park, limited in its habitat benefit, at least on the ground plane. Potentially, there's ways to introduce these more, these, I guess you could think of them as patches and corridors where we have more space. Maybe there's opportunities to integrate habitat within them. And then maybe we think about how these spaces become interconnected, whether it be through edge conditions of forest canopy or otherwise, or drainage ways and so forth. And think about maybe how micro habitat and urban habitat kind of migrates in and out through this park and is a part of the experience as well. The idea of the urban canopy, we have this great urban canopy, but they could be strengthened potentially on the edges to help increase the buffer or supplement buffers with existing neighborhoods, but also work into this ecological diversity and think about the different species that grow and what their benefits are. And then really think about this whole transect. We're starting, if you basically zoom way out, you see downtown on the west, and basically this exurban or this more wild conditions as you move further to the east. And so there's an inherent sort of transect of both activity, but also in terms of ecology that may manifest itself as we move through the park. Programming, another kind of chaotic map. There's obviously, within the communities around here, there's a lot of diversity of opportunities, whether it be for retail, restaurants. There's a lot of public art sort of integrated into the park, but also in the communities around there. We've got historic landmarks and so forth. And I think the main takeaway from this is the park is generally a passive park today, and may remain that way. But we could also think of it as terms of this larger community that exists around here, and the park is a conduit to experience the assets that are in these surrounding neighborhoods, but also how those assets can really support and strengthen sort of the program for the park without having to rely on, say, necessarily have to build a restaurant in the park. Maybe there's a restaurant right out adjacent to the park that you just have a very easy way to get to, and you can promote in that respect. So looking at sort of this sort of symbiotic relationship between these adjacencies becomes really important. And again, if you just think about from a pure planning level, well, currently the Beltline is being developed, has a lot of that stuff integrated. That's an obvious one to think about. There's some of these larger topographic or these areas of land within the park that potentially could offer opportunities for enriched programming opportunities, whether they be passive or otherwise. Thinking about trails, how they might relate to public art as it currently exists in the park, but also as it could be expanded into the park. Maybe we think of the trails not just from a health and wellness and mobility standpoint, but also as a cultural sort of progression and storytelling opportunity as you move through the park. Civic trails, we have all these cultural assets, the Martin Luther King Center, the Carter Center, and historical narratives that are happening within the park itself, as well as the communities around there. That's another overlay with these same trails. You can overlay. I'm thinking about this almost as a program. And then, of course, what we were just talking about before with nature and how moving through the park could begin to reveal and educate the public about the importance of say, stormwater mitigation or habitat and urban habitats and so forth. And then finally, character. Again, the park, as we were just mentioning, presents itself almost as in a singular sort of sense. If you just look at it as this green and connected by trails and beautiful trees and grass and so forth and some sculpture. But as we kind of think about it, it also, because it has this kind of hard to define edge conditions, it starts to blur the line between some of these other places that are nearby. We have Candler Park to the east, the Olmsted Park also, we've got the Beltline, and of course the Carter Center itself. And so sometimes it's hard to tell, like, are you in the park or are you not in the park? And that gets confused a little bit more by some of the branding. There's different entities that have come in and helped develop the park to date. The signage of those still exists within the park, but sometimes you don't really know if this is Freedom Park or if I'm on some larger trail system. So I think gaining some clarity to that becomes really important, both in terms of the experience within the park and the legibility of the park, but also just in terms of promoting the identity of the park. And the stronger the identity of the park, the easier it will be to continue funding for the park and really and maintenance and all the things that are important to the longevity and the usage of the park itself. So maybe we need to work on defining the edges of the park in a stronger way. Maybe we need to think about sort of primary gateways, whether they be at major roadway crossings or MARTA stations or other sort of significant points within the park. Maybe we even think about this park, because this has this art park overlay. So you can kind of think of it, use this analogy in it as this gallery. If you think about how a way a museum is organized, there's usually these wings to these galleries, and each one has a different sort of programmatic intent. Maybe they change over time, but accepting that this form of the park and really thinking about that as an opportunity could be a really interesting way to organize how we think about different activities and so forth that happen within the park itself. And then also thinking about how this park projects itself outward. We have at Jackson Street Bridge, we have this beautiful view of downtown, and people go there to take their photos and so forth. We would hope that, over time, Freedom Park becomes the place where you come to get your photo taken. It already is to a certain extent, but even more so, when you come to Atlanta and you fly into the busiest airport, is there a big photograph taken of Freedom Park with also a view of Atlanta's skyline beyond? Making those sort of connections so that this becomes really, in part at least, the story of Atlanta becomes really important. And these vistas and these iconic things, maybe what Kinder was talking about earlier, can we create these moments that are really sort of universal and really help elevate sort of the overall character of the park? That should certainly be a goal and an opportunity here presenting itself. And then really thinking about how that all happens over the course of the transect of this very linear park. That's the way it's occupied, and how you move from one end to the other, you get all these various ranges of experiences, but they're all bound together by this cohesive identity. So with that, we're gonna hand it back to Jen and her team, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the tools we have to work with and the next steps for the master plan.
Right, thank you, Scott. I am going to share my screen here. All right, so let me share. There we go. Okay, so as we mentioned before, your input is crucial in helping us form this master plan. I'm going to walk you through our public engagement website. I've posted a link to it in the chat. Feel free to get in there and play around. Here you can see the landing page. We'll have announcements and information up at the top. A little brief statement about why we're here, how can you help, and then some fun interactive tools. We've got a mapping tool, a community survey, and a forum. I'm going to show you a little bit about the mapping tool. if it loads. All right, so you've got the map of Freedom Park outlined in red here. You can see there's already a good bit of input that folks have made comments. If you click the place a marker on the map button, you can see all the options. You can call out things you like, ideas, suggestions, your favorite destinations, safety concerns, key gateways and entry points, and you can even highlight popular routes, your favorite routes through the park. So as an example, I used to work downtown, and I was working on a project that was based in Little Five Points, actually. So I would bike from the Peachtree cycle track, or I'm sorry, the cross street. I would bike from downtown, all on protected bikeways, all the way to Little Five Points. So that would put me in about here, and would take me, it's back. All right, let me try this again. And then just click, drag, and draw your line. All right, and then once you've made your placed your markers, you can leave a comment. You can attach a photo. You can see other people's suggestions, and there's a like, dislike feature. All right, so back to the page. We invite everybody to take our community survey, which you can see. And we also have a little forum. We ask what are your favorite places? What do you like about the park? You can see people's comments. A couple people have left some comments. And below that, we've got the schedule of where are we in the planning process. And we have our virtual public meetings, the next of which will be October 15th. We'll have 2 sessions at noon and at 7 p.m. and we invite everyone to attend those. And now I'd like to open it up to any questions. Let me check and see. And it looks like we have we've got a comment from Sarah that I am going to read. She says, just a note, if you pursue enhancing the photo moment opportunity on Jackson Street Bridge, please visit it during peak photo hours. It's very busy, congested, and dangerous for pedestrians spilling out onto the roadway, bicyclists trying to move through along the road, and of course, the cars. I would encourage you to look into road diet solutions or protected pedestrian refuge islands for photos before you encourage even more people to gather in that space for a photo op. Would any of the panelists like to comment on that?
Yeah, I would say, this is Scott with SWA. We did visit that site based on the suggestions of our board and other people we were working with, and you're absolutely right. People were starting to gather there before sunset, actually like an hour before sunset, and it was about 2 or 3 groups of 3 to 4 people each. So it became very congested very fast, and it is a busy street, and it does not have a protected sidewalk or protected bike lanes or anything like that on it. So yes, we completely concur with that comment, and that will certainly be something that we will look into in this master plan.
And we also understand that the city of Atlanta is currently studying a restriping strategy for Jackson Street at that location. So hopefully that will alleviate some of the congestion. But what is also interesting there, it's one of the primary gateways to the park. So we would want to really funnel the traffic from Jackson Street Bridge at that location, and also Martin Luther King Jr. District. So, you know, between all of this, you know, multiple movements at the intersection, it's a very poignant statement that we do need to consider safety at that popular location.
And those are great comments. The comments like that are really helpful to this master plan effort. On the ground sort of observations and insights always really strengthen the whole process.
All right. Thank you, guys. So Lauren Welch actually just shared a link. There actually have been plans for a number of years to do just that, to kind of create a actually designated space for people to have their photos. And so I will post that. I believe you can see the link in the Q&A box, but it's a link to a Curbed article that I will post to the chat window as well. So that looks like all of the questions and comments. Feel free to, if you think of something in the future, we've got our contact info up on the screen, info@freedompark.org. Make sure to check out our website, take our survey, play around with the map. And yeah, thanks everybody for your time. And we look forward to seeing you again as we move this process forward. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, there is another question, I believe.
Oh, there is. So someone asked, I've heard through the years that a pedestrian bridge at Moreland Freedom Parkway was planned. Is that in play? I'll let SWA take that one.
Do you want me to start?
Stephanie, yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll start. So, so I think the answer is yes, but it's certainly not part of the master plan by any means at this point. So we've heard from constituents both in support and against this bridge idea. And so the goal of the master plan is really going to be to see, like, what does the community at large want to see here? Is the kind of pedestrian concern, I think the pedestrian concern is universal, and so there's a number of ways we could address it through the master plan. Those could be interventions at the street level. They could also be a raised bridge. And so the goal is to hear from as many people as possible, their feelings on that topic, and then that will inform the master plan. I don't know if SWA, you want to add anything to that?
I would just say that that's a great example of an idea that makes a lot of sense on the one hand, but has a lot of impacts on the other, and particularly as it relates to the community, a more immediate community. So I think with all those things, they need to fit into some larger strategy that creates this big new opportunity. Sometimes you're solving small problems, sometimes you're creating big new realities, and both are valid. And sometimes you just have to be sure that our pursuit of maybe big new realities doesn't steamroll or violate the needs and of the nearby community. So yeah, we'll be digging into those ideas one by one as we go through this process.
All right. Any final questions before we go? Looks like there's no more questions. All right, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Again, here's our contact info. Send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And thanks again, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks to the Freedom Park Conservancy Board and all of the consultants for the wonderful presentation today. And
We've got one more question.
We got a late entry question. We still have 5 minutes.
I want to see how many times I get
It's a good system, man.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got a question. Does adding lights in Candler Park also create unintended consequences? I will open that one up.
I'll start again. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Nighttime use of parks is really important. I think one of the sort of our like basic tenets is if you invite people to do certain things at a park, in an urban park setting, it has to be safe. And so it goes right to the heart of this question about what is the right amount of activity, what types of activities are we trying to promote, if any, new ones, and nighttime is one of the most important considerations for that. And there are ways to control lighting, but there's limitations to how much you can control them as well. So we know at Candler Park we've got residences that front it, on different sides, and so that's a really strong consideration. So yes, the answer to the question is there are unintended consequences that we will need to navigate with that as well.
Yeah, and we also think about lighting in terms of not just human urban habitat, but also, animal urban habitat, and how that has implications on the health of the ecological environments, within the park and also surrounding it. So it's seeking that balance, and I think we'll study lighting because the site is so extensive. We'll really study lighting on a contextual basis and think about introducing it where it makes sense.
All right, we've got another really good question. Someone asks, what can we expect at the October 15th meeting? What will be presented? Maybe draft concepts? SWA, you want to jump in on that?
That's absolutely right. In total, we have 3 public meetings. Today, it's primarily not a listening session, but hopefully as kind of a solicitation session for comments. Primarily, we did not try to drive any heavy-handed ideas forward. During the next meeting on October 15th, we'll start presenting concepts and sketches and vignettes for different locations in the park, but also kind of big ideas, how the identity of the park as a whole can be strengthened as a brand. We will probably think about big ideas for, each system within the park. So I think it will be both kind of mapping, diagrammatic visual material for, with proposals for people to respond to, and also some very site-specific developments that, will be illustrated in a way that, you'll be able to provide your input. And then during our meeting, I believe in December, it's yet to be scheduled, we'll be rolling out kind of fleshed out master plan concepts. But throughout the whole process, all of these materials will be posted on the website. Everybody will have access and be able to provide comments. So it's kind of like a living process. It's not a black box. That's what's kind of, a silver lining of this new engagement methodologies is that we have these new tools that make this information available throughout the whole process, and people can access it at their leisure. not just during these meetings. And, you know, it really extends the time of engagement, which is extremely beneficial. Anything else? Yeah.
We've got another comment from Sally Dorn. At Inman Park meeting last night, it was announced that the October meetings would cover the same material as September meetings. So one just needed to attend one. That doesn't seem to be accurate information. So perhaps you can make sure correct information is sent to Inman Park Neighborhood Association president and perhaps to the advocator prior to the 9/20 deadline.
Okay. Sounds like, yeah, maybe we got some communication crossed in terms of the 2 sessions today are repeats and the 2 sessions in October are repeats on the same day. But yeah, we will make sure to communicate that again and try to be more clear about it so we don't spread misinformation. Thank you for telling us.
Ellie says, thanks. Thank you.
No comments? Oh, there's another one.
I see Philip's got a comment, but in any event, we'll make sure to communicate it again, whichever way it was said. So we'll make sure to get out those communications to all the neighborhood associations, but also on our social media, on our website, and get that clear.
Right. So that looks like, I'm hesitant to say the end of the questions for now. So I guess we will leave it at that. If you do have questions, send us an email, and hope to see you in October.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.